In one case, a company had 5 bullet points, they were product benefits, and they were clickable. There was just a list of bullets, and what they found was that people were clicking on these things, hoping they'd get more information. But 2 of the bullets were getting a lot more clicks than the others. So not only did they realize that people wanted more information about these benefits, but they realized which benefits appeared to be of most interest to their customers, all from looking at clicks that didn't go anywhere. So, I mean, there's a lot of things you can do to better understand what your customers are doing, what your users are doing, and really turn that into actionable strategies.
Welcome, everyone, to another exciting edition of the e-commerce traffic and conversion podcast. I'm your host, DJ Sprague. My co-host, Scott Brandley, is out today. We have a special guest, Roger Dooley. How are you doing today, Roger?
Doing great, DJ. Thanks for having me on the show.
We're so excited, honestly. Huge fan, big follower. I've read 2 of your 3 books. I still have to read the conversion slide. But in any case, I'd love to introduce you to our audience for those that don't know you or don't know your background as well as I do. Roger Dooley is a keynote speaker. He's a marketing consultant and Forbes contributor. He founded his own consultancy firm, Dooley Direct, and was also a co-founder of College Confidential, which was recently acquired by Hobson's. He spent years in direct marketing and started a successful catalog sales business. Roger Dooley also worked as a director of corporate planning for Hobson's, a Fortune 1000 company. He's the author of Friction, named a Best Business Book of 2019 by Strategy Plus Business. He also wrote Brainfluence and the Persuasion Slide. He also created behavioral science and neuromarketing courses on the CXL platform, which, by the way, I've been watching and they're fantastic. Roger Dooley is a Carnegie Mellon University and University of Tennessee graduate. So once again, welcome to the episode, Roger. It's really exciting to have you here.
Well, again, thanks for having me on, DJ.
Yeah, we've been excited, counting down the days to record this episode. So tell us, how did you get into behavioral science? What was that path?
Well, I guess the roots go very deep. I studied originally as an engineer, chemical engineer of all things, but despite that, I minored in psychology and actually took a course in psychology of persuasion way back when. This was before Influence came out, if you can imagine that. I don't know what we used for a textbook. I've tried to figure that out, but I haven't been able to. So those roots run kind of deep, but were dormant for decades. Actually about 20 years ago now, I saw a couple of areas coming together, which were marketing and neuroscience. So being a digital marketing guy, said, well, I ought to grab a domain, which I did, neurosciencemarketing.com. And I started writing there. And initially, my focus was on sort of the hardcore tools of neuroscience to improve marketing. That is, doing things like fMRI studies or EEG studies, using biometric measurements and so on to gauge how people were responding to advertising and marketing, packaging, and so on. But what I found was that there was a lot more interest when I talked about using behavioral science techniques. And that was, I think, in part because they were accessible to everybody. Way back when, these neuromarketing tools were really only available to the big brands of the world, the Coca-Colas, the BMWs, but anybody could use Robert Cialdini's principles of influence. Anybody could use some of the many cognitive biases that have been shown that people have to improve their marketing. And as a result, I was kind of steered by my audience in that direction. And as a result, my first book, Brainfluence, really was not that much about consumer neuroscience tools, but incorporated a lot more behavioral science tools.
Yeah, speaking of Brainfluence, one of my favorite books. Oops, there it is. As you can see, it's well tabbed and underlined and highlighted and notations.
I love to see that, DJ. Whenever somebody shows me a book that's been thumbed through and it's got scribbles in it and whatnot, that really is good for my heart.
Oh yeah, that's what I do. I tear books apart. Yeah, Brainfluence is a fantastic read, and it's really dives into behavioral science, behavioral economics, a little bit of neuroscience. Of course, you're probably a fan of Martin Lindstrom. I know you read Gerald Zaltman as well. Both great experts in the space. But as I was looking at your book, Friction, I will summarize it this way. All friction, real or perceived, requires precious resources, mental or physical, and we're hardwired to conserve energy. Therefore, we avoid friction pretty much at all costs because we're really hardwired to avoid that mental and or physical energy. Would you say that's a fair assessment of the concepts that you so eloquently write about in your book, Friction?
Right. Just for our audience folks who may not be familiar with friction, or at least the common definition of friction that you and I know, in my book, I define friction as any unnecessary effort to perform a task. If you're trying to accomplish something on a website and there's extra effort required because it's confusing, or there's a long form to fill out where a shorter form would suffice, that would be friction. But fundamentally, DJ, the idea has its roots in the ideas of Daniel Kahneman, who sadly our Nobel Prize winner that we lost earlier this year, but really a fantastic thinker in the behavioral economics space. And he says that there is a law of least effort that applies to both cognitive and physical exertion. And he says people will gravitate to the least demanding path. And I think that that concept really is what underlies the book Friction, and really every marketer should have in mind that your customers are always looking for the least demanding path, and that could be your competitor if your path is too effortful.
Yeah, well said. So tell us, because you're obviously steeped in this and have wrote a couple of books about it, but tell us about friction in the user experience, friction on a website. I know you delve a lot into that, in your presentations and your books. But for our audience who are e-commerce executives, explain what that looks like.
Yeah, I'll do that, DJ. Now, one thing that really drives me a little bit crazy is people think that they know all about friction. I've encountered many people who I say, well, yeah, I'd like to talk about friction. Oh, no, we know all about that. We need something a little more novel and more innovative, something different. If people knew all about friction, why is there so much of it, even today, in so many companies, user experience, customer experience, whether it's on the web, mobile app, in their retail environment or whatever, people, I think it's the sort of lip service when people say, oh yes, we're customer centric. And of course, their policies are not very customer friendly. I think it's, oh yeah, we've eliminated all of friction, but they really haven't. And just to explain, like websites are great examples. I mean, even today, logging onto a site to make a hotel reservation, suddenly I'm presented with like a series of captchas where I've got to identify fire hydrants or crosswalks or, pictures without cars or crazy stuff. I mean, is this really necessary? And that's just the number of form fields, sometimes the number of keystrokes. A friend of mine is Peter Ramsey. He's a UK user experience expert. And he's done teardowns, and he continues to do these teardowns of companies' user experience. And a few years ago, he looked at about a dozen different banks, both traditional banks and then fintech companies, about a half a dozen of each. And he did something that really, I think, no human should be forced to do. He opened up accounts at every single one of them and logged every single step, every keystroke, every click, and so on. Then he did international money transfer with the same process and did a whole series of typical transactions that a customer might do and logged every aspect of the experience, even like how long it took the account to be operational and so on. And the differences were gigantic. Just looking at one metric, the number of clicks needed to open an account, one company, a fintech firm, managed to do it in 24 clicks. The worst bank did it in 120 clicks. So that's about 100 more clicks I'm sure in addition to those clicks, there were a lot more keystrokes and screen changes and everything else. As a result, fintech companies, by and large, have been signing up new customers at a much faster rate than many of the traditional banks. Now, not all traditional banks have bad user experience, but some of them just haven't caught up. And that's true not just for banks, it's true for e-commerce companies. In fact, Peter just did a teardown on Zara, the fast fashion company, and how really terrible their user experience is. Stuff that you can't read because the background is moving and changing colors. Things that just make it more difficult for the customer to get stuff done. And Amazon is the really the model for any e-commerce company. If you want to see how to make things easy, Amazon really does it. They invented one-click ordering. They spent millions of dollars to defend that one-click patent, even though the only thing they were imposing on their competitors was just one little click. It doesn't seem like it'd be worth that much money, but and that much management time and attention, but it was to them, and it was worth $1 million to Steve Jobs. They bought one-click ordering, the rights to it, for their new music store at the time, iTunes, and that worked out pretty well for them. But the only thing they were getting for all this was just one little click less than the competition. And then you look at the sort of differences that I described between the banks, where you've got dozens of clicks differences. It's really crazy how many companies don't understand how to minimize friction. Amazon does it in every aspect of their business. Even returns are easy. I was in the mail order business for years, direct marketing business, and I hated returns. And we did not make it all that easy to return stuff because, one return would basically wipe out the profit on probably 4 similar sales or 5 similar sales. But Amazon counterintuitively makes it super easy to return stuff because they know that gives people the confidence to buy there. And, you can imagine, I think search is another place where there's a lot of differences between companies. Some make it easy to find stuff, others not so easy. So, I could go on and on, but there are big differences in e-commerce companies.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. I think it was actually even Tony Hsieh, founder of Zappos, that kind of showed the path forward for Amazon on the ease of returns. Their original policy was, buy as many shoes as you want. We'll pay for the shipping to your house and the shipping back, and you have a 365-day return window. So basically, they removed friction by removing the risk.
Right. Yeah. Zappos was definitely a key influencer there. And I think their success with customer experience, theirs is a much more high touch customer experience than Amazon's, but still, they like Amazon, Zappos put the customer at the center of everything.
Yeah. Yeah. The user experience trumped all. The elusive UX, we talk about UX and CX, but the reality is that, to your point in your book, if you're not looking at it from the lens of removing or mitigating friction at every single step, every single click, every single form fill, you're really not engineering CX or customer experience. Because as you say in your book, if you're not reducing friction, you're increasing, bounce rate or abandonment rate. So, my next question is, in your mind, with our desire to collect first-party data, do you think we're also creating more and more friction as a result?
Well, explain what you mean by that, DJ.
Forms, opt-ins, collecting information from the user to own that data versus using, retargeting pixels from third parties like social media, Google, et cetera.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think if you have any kind of a field to collect information from, any kind of a form to collect information from a customer, the fewer fields will get a higher completion rate, a higher successful completion rate. That's been studied a lot of times, and it's just about always true. And so if you can eliminate some data element, like, do you really need your customer's fax number these days? I've still once in a while run into that on a form. It's like, really? There's a lot of stuff that you don't need. And also, If you're asking for more information, do you need the person's title really? I mean, maybe you can figure that out some other way, or you just don't need it. I mean, it's nice to have all this stuff. It'd be great to have a complete profile of every inquiry, but you have to figure out what you can live with and make it very easy to do. One particular strategy I've seen, DJ, for getting some of that customer information is to use a micro commitment strategy. And this is based partly on Ryan Levesque's Ask method, where instead of giving people a long form, you start off by doing a little pop-up where you ask them one question, simple question like gender, maybe not so simple these days, but still not very threatening. Most people answer that, and then move on to something else like general age, like a broad age bracket or something. So people can answer this stuff without feeling threatened. They don't feel like they're giving up anything too personal. But then as you get a little bit farther with another pop-up and another pop-up, and I think a typical might be 6 or 8 of these things. So it's not excessive. You can get a little more detailed and a little more effortful because the person has already made this commitment to getting the information that they want at the end of it. And they're usually promised something. They're going to get some insight into whether it's a self-improvement thing or some aspect of the personality or their golf game or whatever it could be. There's sort of a payoff at the end. And then the very last question, after you've put in, filled out maybe 7 or 8 questions that include some more detailed information near the end, then, okay, we now know what your management style is, or your golf swing style is, or whatever. Just enter your email address and we'll send it to you. And at that point, they get a very high completion rate because somebody is really committed to this process. They want the information. They have already filled out 7 fields or something like that, or answered 7 questions. And so it's quite natural to continue. I mean, that's Bob Cialdini's principle of commitment. So yep. I think that's one way you can get a little more information. But to me, the ideal thing is to just make it as simple and as easy as possible. Because even if you're doing it in that mode, every time you make people answer one more question, or you get somebody who's going to just get fed up and bail out of it.
Yeah, agreed. I would say also to that, test a progress bar. So people know, they're 40%, 60%, 80% done, because sometimes you get down
it's not too intimidating. If I check the first one and I see that I've made a tiny dent in the progress bar, that's when I bail out right there.
That's right.
I've seen some hotel surveys like that where, instead of asking me 1 or 2 simple questions and giving me a text box where I can put in comments, they give me these detailed things where, okay, now we're going to talk about the room, and they're asking about the pillows and the mattress and the towels and like 10 other things in the room that I'm rating from 1 to 10. I mean, who has time for this? Who even notices this stuff? And to me, that's just crazy. So a progress bar is good if progress is quick. Like if you can click finish one screen and bingo, you're a third done. Okay, that's pretty reasonable.
Yeah, exactly. Agreed. I took that same hotel survey. I did it just because I I had to see what it was all about and what the end looked like. But yeah, it was an infinity survey. Agreed.
Yeah, I mean, it's great info. Like if they could get every guest to do that, wow. I mean, they would have great detailed info for their purchasing people, for their housekeeping people, and everything else. But you're going to get 1 out of 1,000 people who actually goes through the whole thing.
Yeah, you and I were probably the only ones.
Right. Yeah, I did it as an experiment, so I didn't really want to do it, but I actually took screenshots as I was going, and I've used it in some of my presentations to slightly embarrass the hotel brand.
Yeah, what not to do. So speaking of that, what are the most common friction points that you've seen websites do that they can and should avoid? The common pitfalls in creating friction.
Well, I mean, there's probably a million of them, DJ, but I think one is the checkout process, where it is unnecessarily complicated. Too many steps, too many fields. Does a customer have to set up an account to check out? If they do, you're going to lose people there. If they can check out as a guest, that's great. If they can check out using PayPal instead of, or some other payment method, like a payment intermediary, rather than giving a company they don't really know their credit card information and having that credit card out there, knowing that someday that site might get hacked and they're going to have to get a new credit card number. That to me is one thing to do. Just make it as simple as possible. The fewest steps, fewest clicks, and minimum commitment on the part of the customer to complete the order. So again, it's wonderful to have customers set up accounts where you can market to them and all that stuff. But, it's, if you want to make the sale, make it simple and easy. I think, search and product discovery, are a second area that I see a lot of friction in. Some companies have very powerful search tools. If you're looking for a product, you can, start typing and you'll get good suggestions, in the search bar where, it's auto completing for you or giving you some autocomplete suggestions that make sense. So that's one way. And then of course, the results themselves. A few years ago, I compared two big home improvement stores and I did the exact same search at both of them. One, and this is a tricky area because, there's so many different ways of describing things. That thing on the outside of your house, the water comes out of, it could be a hose bib, it could be a faucet, it could be a spigot. There's probably some other names for it too. And, so it's a challenging task, but the smart companies have figured out how to do that, interpret what the customer is looking for and give them relevant results. Amazon, again, is a great example. It's almost like they are reading your mind when they give you their autocomplete suggestions, and they probably are. They might even be looking at what they know about you or something to complete it. But, that both letting the customer begin the search easily with autocomplete, and then also the results have to be relevant. And that's one area where Amazon fails a little bit because they have these sponsored results, and the sponsors often use broader keyword targeting. So, you asked for, an item, a coffee pod, and you were expecting Keurig type coffee pods, but instead you get other kinds of coffee pods because some sponsor didn't target their stuff very well. And, they end up in your search results, and that has a couple of negative effects. First of all, customers have to scroll past those and determine that they aren't the right thing. But also they can result in mistaken orders because people these days are so trusting in search results. If they search for a coffee pod, and they get something that looks good and the price is right, they're likely to buy it without even verifying that it's exactly what they wanted. So, the results really have to be spot on. And I would be reluctant to adopt that model of letting people push their own stuff into your search results. I guess Amazon makes money at it. Now, they otherwise do a great job, but to me, that's one of the few things I see that Amazon doesn't do all that well. And, I think that probably the third thing is simply keeping the page design simple. If we're talking about websites, make sure that everything is absolutely clear what the customer is supposed to do next, how they can see the information they want. I think one of the things in that Zara user experience teardown was that it's really hard to figure out what to do at a given point, or hard to figure out what you were supposed to click on, how to get more information, and it should really be very intuitive, very easy to just sort of flow through that process. Ideally, what you would like is imagine a playground slide that's very slippery. You'd like somebody to start out at that slide as they enter your e-commerce store and almost just, not be able to stop on the way to the checkout at the bottom, because everything is just so simple, so intuitive, and so easy. Mm-hmm. But if you've got those friction points in there, they're going to get stuck partway down and they're going to bail out.
Well, you wrote a book on that, the persuasion slide.
Yeah, that's right. Based on the playground slide and the ideas of BJ Fogg about how we focus too much on motivating people to do stuff instead of making that stuff easier.
Yeah, exactly. That's really so true. Yeah, motivation can take you so far, but the reality is, the more friction you create, even inadvertently, the more motivation is required. And sometimes you can't generate enough motivation to overcome all those little or big friction points that you've created, because one department wants a 27 field form. Somebody else wants this information. Somebody else wants that information. And all of a sudden it becomes this Frankenstein of forms and fields that, everybody's got their hands in because they want attribution for this and they want this data point and they want that data point. And all of a sudden nobody wants to figure out, that form and fill it out because the motivation isn't great enough to overcome all the friction that's been created. Right?
Yeah, your customers just aren't that motivated in most cases. Maybe if you're a roof repair person and it's raining and somebody's got a leak, they're motivated because they want something to happen right away and they'll jump through a hoop or two. But in most cases, they're casual browsers. They don't absolutely need whatever it is they're going to buy. And they've got various places where they could buy it. I mean, you can buy anything at Amazon. So your customer's motivation level just isn't that high.
Yeah, exactly. So that brings up another question. Can you explain the friction curve in your book? You talk about the friction curve, and what does that mean?
It hasn't really gotten too much attention. I appreciate your calling that out. Let me see if I have a copy here. I can hold it up, maybe. Right. Well, basically, if you're looking at lead generation, that less, you can tolerate a certain amount of friction, but and you can maybe get a little bit more information and so on. But ultimately, as friction goes up, your leads are going to go down. And it's kind of what we've been talking about, DJ. Less is almost always better. Initially you can tolerate a little bit of extra friction, but once you've got what you need, then it's time to say, okay, we're going to draw the line here.
Yeah, exactly. The point of diminishing returns, right? Explain a little bit, because this is so counterintuitive as product people, as marketers, but the concept that choice can be a friction point.
Right. And I think the book Paradox of Choice made that, was sort of, the counterintuitive idea with a bunch of research behind it that people confronted by, people always say they want more choice. Ask 100 people, you want more choice or less choice? 100 are going to say, well, more choice, of course. But what researchers have found from a variety of universities in other studies, it's too much choice can, first of all, make choosing difficult. And so you get people actually not making any choice at all. And also sometimes it can lead to a greater regret afterwards. So, but really, I think as e-commerce marketers, we're mostly interested in the first piece there that, if you want people to make a decision, don't give them too many choices. And I think if we talk about in-person sales, skilled salespeople know that. They don't lay out 20 products in front of the customer and say, hey, which one of these looks good to you? They will offer several products and sort of point to the one that they recommend and explain why they recommend it. But of course, in e-commerce, that's not really how it works. Somebody does a search and you get a display of products that meet the search criteria. And so it can be overwhelming. What you can do, though, is use some techniques that Amazon uses. Obviously, Amazon has more choice than any company on the planet, I think. Just millions of products. You search for any category and you're going to find an overwhelming array of products. But they do some smart things. First of all, they will highlight things that are either, say, a bestseller or an Amazon pick, which is sort of a recommendation based on hopefully everything, including customer experience and returns and such. So I think they try, and even though they offer a lot of choice, they present things in a logical way with the best matches first for what you're looking for, and then they further do things to help you narrow your choice. They also provide reviews. They provide ratings. So if you're comparing two similar products, you can look and see, okay, well, this one's rated 4.5 and this other one's only 3.8. So they provide tools for you to differentiate between the similar products. I think it still can be a little bit of an overwhelming experience, but I think that other e-commerce companies can learn from that too. If you typically find you're presenting people with a lot of choice, give them some tools to separate out those choices and hopefully arrive at the best decision for them.
Yeah. Very true. Some kind of a decision aid, some way to create filters, to semi-automate the decision process to narrow it down is one way. Another way is to reduce your category pages to 3 to 5 products in a category and not throwing up 60 different products on a category page, because that's just going to make people spin. And so to create more smaller, granularized category pages versus, here's everything we got, figure it out.
Right. And, I think that's one way. Of course, sometimes you want to present people with more products. You mentioned filters. That's a good tool too. Like for somebody for whom a brand is important, giving people the ability to search only for a particular brand, for example, or for a material. Like if I'm looking at sweaters, okay, I want merino wool sweaters. Those kinds of tools will help narrow the choice to a much smaller subset of products that are going to be likely appropriate.
Yeah, or even new arrivals or closeouts.
Right. Yep. But those are all ways of doing it, and definitely things. Promotional pricing can have an effect on decision making. There's a lot of research on that, but just putting like in physical retail, putting a yellow tag on something, even if it isn't an actual sale price, has been shown to increase sales because people react, oh, wow, this must be a deal. And they look at it and they may purchase it.
Yep. They use that mental shortcut and just, it must be on sale. Must be, a better value. So I'm going to choose this one. So true. Thinking fast and slow. Kahneman once again.
Yep, right.
Just make decision-making easy. So what would you tell an e-commerce executive if you were to give them 3 tips to reduce friction on their website? What would those 3 tips be?
Well, okay, one of them I think is a kind of a research tip. I would watch some regular people use your website to buy something. And I don't mean employees who've been pushed into doing it or professional testers who work for testing companies. Find some typical people. Ask your mom. There's actual book out called The Mom Test, which I think is, it's one of those books where you don't really even need to read the book once you know the title, kind of like Steve Krug's Don't Make Me Think for website design. But I would have people who aren't familiar with the company, aren't familiar with the website, try and accomplish a task there and observe them carefully and watch where they get stuck. You're going to find that, oh, hey, we thought that was totally obvious, but people are getting hung up there for some reason. They're not sure where to go next. They're not sure how to find the product they're looking for. The search box is hard to see or something. You'll find those friction points, and then that enables you to eliminate them. And to me, rather than focus, to me, testing and observation and looking at your analytics are really so important because you can see where people are failing to complete an action. You can see where they're bailing out. I think that another tool that can be used, in fact, there's free tools out there. There's Google Analytics that gives you a ton of information. There's Microsoft Clarity that's lesser known, but it's an actual behavior measurement tool that measures the behavior of people who are using your website. And that can even do things like click tracking. It can measure rage clicking when people are clicking like crazy on something that's not doing anything. One thing that people get wrong, DJ, with click tracking, like in my email program, I can see what links people clicked on. So I say, 25% of the people clicked on this link, only 10% clicked on this other thing. So they're less interested in the other thing. But it's important to see what people clicked on that isn't clickable. And you need a different software for that, like I described with Microsoft Clarity. And I have no affiliation with Microsoft or Google, by the way. And these are free tools, but of course, you're sharing your information with them, which they probably find valuable. But you can, when you find that people are clicking on something that is not actually clickable, and you will, I guarantee it, if you've never done click tracking, you're going to find people are clicking on a headline or something that, and you say, well, you go to your designer, well, hey, why are people clicking on this? And the designer will say, well, that's because they're stupid. No, if a lot of people are clicking on something, it's the design that's stupid. And you need to either make that thing clickable, going to wherever it would logically go to, or you need to make whatever they're supposed to click on much more visible. And, one other interesting story about the value of click tracking. In one case, a company had 5 bullet points, or product benefits, and they were clickable. There was just a list of bullets, and what they found was that people were clicking on these things, hoping they'd get more information. But 2 of the bullets were getting a lot more clicks than the others. So not only did they realize that people wanted more information about these benefits, but they realized which benefits appeared to be of most interest to their customers, all from looking at clicks that didn't go anywhere. So, I mean, there's a lot of things you can do to better understand what your customers are doing, what your users are doing, and really turn that into actionable strategies.
Yeah, that's a really good feedback. In fact, I always try to advocate where it's appropriate that an e-commerce store on their homepage and the hero image is to have those checkboxes or bullet points or start items that are both a decision aid and a value prop tool. So, for example, you could have, if you're selling 4 main categories of products, those categories could be listed as bullet points, which would also be clickable links to those category pages. Or if they were selling things based on value or low cost or particular applications, those could also be clickable links to pages that further explain that particular value proposition, speed or price or quality or customization, right? So yeah, very, very good point. We do a lot of that heat mapping to see what people click on and to see what they think is actionable and then make it actionable. That's some of the best insights you can get on your website is heat mapping tools.
Definitely.
So our last question, Roger, and thank you so much for everything you've shared with us today. But we have our kind of legendary $1 million question that we like to ask our experts. So the question would be, what would be the most impactful or beneficial thing that an e-commerce store could do to dramatically improve their revenue? What's the one thing that would move the needle the furthest?
Well, DJ, this answer is going to be different for different companies because everybody's situation is different. But to me, the big problem that I see is the checkout process. Few companies have a checkout process as straightforward and simple as Amazon's. And typically, the cart abandonment rate is like in the 70% range and up. Most recent stats are in that range. Now, not everybody puts something in a shopping cart because they're about to buy it. Sometimes they put it there to check the shipping or other stuff, which maybe that's a clue too. Maybe you should make it clear what that is without people having to put stuff in their cart. But regardless, what you want to do is minimize that cart abandonment rate. You want people to, if they've decided to put a product there, you want them to complete that checkout process. And of course, one way that Amazon does that is by not having, you don't have to use a cart. You can simply click buy with one click, and it'll skip the entire cart process, which if you can implement that, that to me would be something that would probably dramatically improve conversion rate, reduce cart abandonment, and so on.
That's a really good insight. Yeah, 70%, 69.7% or 69.9%, I think, is the latest stat I read. So let's just say it's 70% of carts are abandoned. That's tremendous. That means the average e-commerce website converts at 1.9% of their total traffic. So let's round that up to 2%. And then only 30% of your carts complete the purchase. So there's some huge opportunities there to gain revenue by increasing your conversion rate and obviously increasing your checkout. I love the idea of focusing on cart abandonment as the single best way to increase revenue. That makes a ton of sense. Well,
Sometimes you may have to probe why that cart abandonment is occurring. They put something in there because they weren't sure they wanted to buy it. They were going to look at more products and they got confused. Were they trying to answer some other question like shipping that really shouldn't have to put stuff in your cart to answer? And a little bit of deeper probing and research on that could probably be helpful. But as you say, DJ, just imagine if a company could convert even a third or a half of those abandoned carts into sales, what the impact would be on their revenue and on their profitability.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. Well, Roger, it's been such an amazing pleasure to have you on our show. And again, if you've not read Friction, you have to read Friction. It's one of my favorite books on behavioral science. It really gets inside the psyche of avoiding friction and why people don't do what you want and expect them to do based on the friction points, whether they be conscious or unconscious, that have been created in the buyer journey on the website, through the checkout process, the homepage, the category page, the product pages, the forms, you name it. Every single touch point needs to be looked at under a microscope and dissected to analyze if there's any friction that can be either eliminated or reduced. And the book has a lot of examples in that, not only for websites, but government and businesses and industry alike. But it's a great read, highly recommend it. And Roger, thanks again so much for sharing your wisdom, your insights, and your decades of experience around behavioral science, and particularly the subject of this episode, which is identifying and removing friction from your website. So thanks again, and we'll see you on the next episode of the e-commerce traffic and conversion podcast.
Well, thanks for having me, DJ.
Thank you.